Hey guys, welcome back to another video. Hope y'all having a great day. And with the Super Bowl and the 2025-26 NFL season officially over with, now that Seattle has won the Super Bowl, I figured I'd do a mock draft post Super Bowl. So with no further ado, let's get into it. So starting off with the number one overall pick, the Raiders. It has been the same pick, I think, in every of my mock drafts. And it's Fernando Mendoza. He is the top pick for a reason. I know a lot of people think, oh, well, Mendoza isn't that great of a top pick because he doesn't have these intangibles. He doesn't have what you normally would see in a first overall pick. But look, he's got the size at, I think, like 6'5". Yeah, 6'5", 225. Um, so he has the size. He has the IQ to play. Like he's probably like the smartest quarterback we've seen since maybe Andrew Luck. I know that's a while back, but I just think a lot of people hate on him because he's not the prototypical quarterback we see at number one, like we've seen recently with like Cam Ward, Caleb, Bryce Young, Trevor Lawrence, Joe Burrow, where it's like these guys are like these amazing highlight reel quarterbacks. Mendoza isn't that, but he's a smart, intellectual quarterback who is going to get it done. And I think the Raiders would be stupid to trade out. I know next year's class so much better, but we were saying that about this year's class. Like it's always on paper how these quarterbacks look, but we don't know. Like there's a reason why the Titans held on to that number one pick despite having Will Levis and maybe being able to go out and sign like a Sam Darnold. They kept that pick and drafted Cam Ward despite everybody saying it was a better class because they were like, we want our quarterback now. We don't want to have to wait and then not be able to get our quarterback. Teams, like, I know everybody says, oh, next year's going to be better. We don't actually know that. And if you're the Raiders, you can get your franchise quarterback now and not have to wait. Moving on to the Jets at number two. I think it really comes down to one of the three edge rushers. It could be one of the receivers, Tate, Tyson, maybe Lemon. Maybe that's a little too high, but I think it comes down to one of the edge rushers. I know Reese is listed at linebacker, but he's more of an edge type player. Like he'll switch over to the edge, kind of like what Micah Parsons did, or what Jalen Walker I think will eventually do. But I'm gonna go Ruben Bain. I know Bain. There's a lot of talk about how long his arms are, but the potential is there, and I feel like if you're the Jets, you know, I know that Reese you would think would be the better pick because he can be like a Swiss Army knife type guy where you can put him in multiple different situations. Like Jermaine Johnson is going to be a free agent and obviously wasn't drafted by. He's going to be a free agent after this upcoming season. Will McDonald has his promise, but neither guy has been that great the last couple of years. And with a new front office in charge who didn't draft those two guys, Bain just makes a lot of sense if they're just going to go based off like all the players available. Bain is going to be up there, and it makes a lot of sense for the Jets to bring in a difference maker on defense after they traded away their top two guys this past season. Moving on to the Cardinals, it's going to be kind of like the Raiders, the same pick. I would go with Maui Noah, but I'm trying to, like these later mocks as we get post national championship and Super Bowl are more so me trying to predict what's going to happen. And a lot of people have been saying Spencer Fano is the top tackle and have him going to Arizona. So that's what I'm going to do. And look, the Cardinals, We know Mike LaFleur is the new coach. They want to move off from Kyler Murray, which I do think is the right move because, yes, you could try to keep him on this team and maybe under a new offense he could do something, but the Cardinals, I feel like, should just try to build up this roster for whoever the actual long term quarterback is, whether it's a guy in free agency where they trade for somebody, whether it's in next year's class. And this kind of reminds me, obviously, a worse class, but this kind of reminds me of 2023 when the Cardinals, new head coach comes in. Obviously, Monty Oswalt also came in, but new coach comes in. They're picking third. They don't need a quarterback, even though Kyler was banged up, just like he was this past season. And they end up going with Paris Johnson, even though Will Anderson seemed like the best overall player that Arizona could draft. And I could kind of see it, like the Cardinals just going with a position of need in a draft with not many elite players and just trying to build for the future. And Mike LaFleur maybe is that long term coach. But on to four with the Titans. This could be one of the wide receivers. I could see it. Tyson, Tate. You want to get Cam Ward a weapon. A lot of people have thrown out Jeremiah Love. And while they do need a better running back, it's just, I don't think four. Like, Tennessee has a lot bigger issues. And I feel like they should just go with the best overall defender for Robert Saleh. I'm going to go Arvell Reese. It could be David Bailey, and there's been reports that Tennessee would like if Bailey's on the board, they would instantly take him. They would not pick somebody else. Reese is like a Swiss Army knife. You can put him at multiple different positions, and Robert Saleh can kind of have his own sort of Fred Warner, Nick Bosa combined sort of with the Titans. And I think Tennessee, like I think in free agency and trades, are going to try to address that offense to help out Cam Ward. And I feel like with a top pick, they're going to go defense to help out one of the worst units and give Saleh another guy on that side alongside Jeffrey Simmons to make an impact. Moving on to five to the Giants. I mean, this could be one of the receivers, especially if Wan'Dale Robinson does leave. And you have Neighbors, but who else? But I'm gonna go with the. I was gonna go tackle, but I'm actually gonna go Caleb Downs, which I know seems high for a safety and back to back Ohio State Buckeyes linebacker and safety, not the most valued positions. Um, but there's been a lot of reports that like John Harbaugh wants to bring in a difference maker on the defensive side. And look, there's not many elite players in this class. Like outside of like outside of like Downs, Love, Bain, Reese, Bailey, and six guys right or five guys right there. Outside of those guys, maybe consider Mendoza, but there's not many elite players in this class, and the Giants might just want to select one of those guys. Like they could say, "Oh, well, we might need a tackle, right tackle. We could bring in a receiver," but they might just say, "Hey, those guys are not, you know, like we don't know if they're going to be elite players at the NFL levels." Caleb Downs, we know, like Caleb Downs is one of those players where whoever he gets drafted by, he's going to be a game changer. It's kind of like when Kyle Hamilton was coming out. Like everybody knew Hamilton was going to be an elite player. It's just teams undervalued the safety position. And in a class where there's not many elite players, I could see Downs end up being a top pick. That's where I'm going to go. Browns at 6. I think it comes down to whether they want one of the receivers or if one of the tackles is still available. And I think they would go Maui Noah. With injury, with This with guys could be retiring, could be free agents, and most of that offensive line is always injured. Cleveland's going to need to ring protection for whoever that long term quarterback is, whether it's Shador, whether it's somebody else in the draft, off season, who knows? But the Browns just need to address the offensive line, and if one of those guys does fall to six, I think the Browns would sprint to the podium and would be so happy to make this selection. Moving on to seven with the Commanders, it's got to be the top defensive player, and I'm going to David Bailey here. I've been marking him a lot to Washington because they need edge rusher. This could also be Sonny Styles because they need to improve that linebacker core. This could also be if they want to go one of the top corners, but they need to get younger and better on the defensive side. And if Bailey falls, which I think he could, like I know a lot of people have been mocking him a lot higher than seven. Like I've seen even people have him going two. I don't know. I feel like Bailey, who yes showed the production this year, he's not that great against the run, and teams love to have guys who are not just pass rushers, but they're also great like defensive linemen. Like they don't want just a pass rush guy who's gonna always be going after the quarterback, and when it comes to the run, is gonna be non-existent. I don't know. That might push Bailey down the board because teams might say, "Well, why would we draft a guy who is mainly just a pass rusher when we can get a Bain, a Reese, Sonny Styles, somebody who is great against the run, even downs, and those guys might end up going higher than Bailey just because of their ability to be three down players and not just be pass rush guys. One of the Saints at eight. This could be Jeremiah Love, but I think they go the best wide receiver. And well, I love Tyson a lot. Tate seems to be going a lot higher because of Tyson's injury history, which could play a factor in why he might fall. So I'm gonna have the Saints go with the first receiver in Carnell Tate. It just makes a lot of sense. Like the Saints need to adjust receiver outside of Chris Olave. Tyler Shuck, is he the guy to be? And you got to get weapons around him. Like we've seen a lot of the times, young quarterbacks they show promise, but then teams don't build around them, and so they're just stagnant. I mean, Sam Darnold, he his first 2 years before that disastrous 2020 year were pretty like they showed flashes of a guy who could lead a team to the Super Bowl. It's just he never got good coaching, and the roster was just never that great around him to where he didn't have much to do. And then when you're always getting pressure on you, when you're always getting sacked, and it just makes your mindset um think differently of what you really are. You might start to doubt yourself. But young, when you ever have a young quarterback who shows promise in the first couple of years, always invest in the offensive line and then the weapons around the guy. Because if he's your long term quarterback, you want him to be there for 10, 15 years and not, always being banged up and having to move on from him because he didn't show promise enough because he didn't build around him. Moving on to nine, I'm going to keep on having it until the Chiefs, bring in another running back. Jeremiah Love is the perfect fit in Kansas City. I know a lot of people are going to talk about, oh, they should go defense. Target, if one of the edge rushers is available, target one of those guys, target, one of the corners. Like, I know a lot of people are going to say, oh, go defense. But look, the Chiefs, have started to decline, and because one, the offense was not that great after Eric Bieniemy left, and he's back, and it wasn't up him, but they haven't been drafting well. And when you're picking the highest you have in the Mahomes era, you need to go with a guy who you know is going to be a playmaker, is going to be great. And Jeremiah Love is that. Like I said, he's one of the top 5 overall players in the class, maybe even top 3. He just plays a less valued position, kind of like Caleb Downs, kind of like Arvell Reese if you consider him a linebacker. Like those guys play lesser known, lesser valued positions, which is why they're not going to go as high as maybe people would think they were, despite them being like top 5 players in the class. And Jeremiah Love would be an amazing fit. Whenever Mahomes returns, he has a safety blanket where he can just hand the ball off, knowing Love will be able to make room. And it gives the Chiefs offense a playmaker they haven't had since 2018 with Kareem Hunt. Like the running backs they've had since they moved on from Kareem Hunt for reasons I don't want to talk about, but they just have not had good running backs. And in a league where you need to have good running backs, because we saw, last season, 2024, where guys like Saquon Barkley, Derrick Henry, Josh Jacobs, this year Jonathan Taylor, James Cook, can be the engines for a team to be successful. And for a Chiefs team that wants to get back to competing in the Super Bowl, Jeremiah Love would be a phenomenal pick. I know a lot of people say they could go after Breece Hall or Travis Etienne or, one of the free agent running backs. But why not go with a guy who's younger, less mileage on him, and you can have for 5 years before you have to pay him that second contract? Moving on to the Bengals. I think this comes down to whether you go with one of the corners or whether you go with Sonny Styles. And I'm going to go with Styles. I haven't seen many people mock him to the Bengals. Maybe it's because they have 2 young linebackers in Demetrius Knight and Barrett Carter who play well. But look, you see people say it all the time. Just because you have guys who show promise at a position doesn't mean you can't improve in it. And Sonny Styles would be amazing. Like I know Knight and Carter, played decent enough where it's like you could say they could be the linebackers of the future. But if Sonny Styles is there, why not take it? Why not go with an elite linebacker who could give you instant impact, could really finally give this defense something they haven't had in a while? Because like Logan Wilson, past couple of years started to decline before they traded him. Styles can give you that elite production and really give you like a quarterback of the defense, which is what linebackers are usually known as. At number 11 with the Dolphins, I'm actually going to go with Mekhi Lemon. I know it's not the normal pick, but why not? Jalen Waddle, um, obviously is there, but he was almost traded at the deadline. You know if Buffalo had given up, I think it was a 2027 first Miami wanted, and if they had given that up, he would have been a Bill. So, but Tyreek Hill, it's not even known if he's going to be playing this upcoming year. You have guys like Malik Washington and others, but Mekhi Lemon can give you that secondary guy. And if Jalen Waddle is traded, which is a possibility, why not go and get his replacement with Mekhi Lemon? He's not the same type of player, but he can be that number one receiver. Like he kind of reminds me of JSN in the sense of a smaller receiver who most people are going to think is just a slot guy, but he's a lot more than that. And Lemon can truly give this Dolphins passing attack another weapon if they do keep Waddle, or a new guy in there for whoever the long term quarterback is. We're on to 12 with the Cowboys. I'm going to go with Mansoor Lane at LSU. I mean, Dallas has needed quarters, Yeah, but I mean, they have needed quarters. Like Trayvon Diggs and Deron Bland were a great duo when healthy, but Diggs obviously is gone. Bland isn't the same player he once was, and they need corner out. Like one of the reasons why the defense was so bad was because their secondary was one of the worst, where the pass rush just wasn't able to get home because the secondary, was not good. So they need to improve that, and Dallas just needs to go with the best overall corner, like or best overall defender available, and it would be a perfect fit for the Cowboys. We're on to 13 with the Rams. I'm gonna go Jordan Tyson. I've seen a lot of people mock wide receiver to LA, and it does make sense. You have Puka, who hopefully he can get his extension before this upcoming season now that he's contract extension eligible. But Devontae Adams only has 1 year left. You don't know how much longer he's going to be playing and if he's going to want to stick around with the Rams. So you get a secondary guy next to Nakua for the future. And like Tyson, if he didn't have the injury history that he does with like multiple leg injuries and like a torn ACL, he'd be up there as like a top 5 pick, no doubt. Like we would be seeing most of him going to the Jets, maybe at 2, the Titans, the Giants, but you don't see that because Tyson's injury history has made people think, well, maybe teams are going to say he's not, you know, that great. I think Tyson's my number one receiver. It might come down to we trust Tate and Lemon to be healthier, and so Tyson could fit right there. We're on to 14 with the Ravens. This is an interesting pick. You could go interior defensive line. You know, is Madubuike going to be back? If he is back, how much of that player we saw pre-injuries are going to be? They could go interior offensive line, you know, which is what I've had. But I'm going to go with an interesting pick, which I think a lot of people are talking about. I'm going to go edge with, I'm going to go Keldrick Falk out of Auburn. You know, Baltimore has not had great edge rusher help. Like Odafe, I think last season became the first Raven since 2018 Terrell Suggs to have a double-digit sack season. So that just goes to show you that the Ravens, while they've been a great team, have not had great edge rushers, and they have, and past have always had really good edge rushers. I know they drafted Mike Green last year, who, if it not for sexual assault, would have been a first round pick. But they don't have much else on the edge. Like they've always had these veterans, Kyle Van Noy, I think Justin Houston maybe for a year. Like they've always had these older veterans, and they've never had a true elite pass rusher off the edge. And I think Falk could be the missing link to this defense and giving Jesse Minter a true elite edge rusher to build this defense up. We're on to 14 with the Bucks. This could be a lot of picks. This could be corner, edge. I'm actually going with an interesting pick. I'm going to go with Kenyon Sadiq, which I know it seems high for a tight end, um, more so because Sadiq isn't really viewed as like a Brock Bowers, Tyler Warren, Colston Loveland type of tight end prospect. But he could go this high. And Cade Adams, a free agent. Does Tampa want to pay long term money for him? and you can, get the same amount of production, if not more, from Kenyon Sadiq, and give this offense another weapon. Mike Evans, free agent, might leave. Chris Godwin might might be getting traded. They have Buka, McMillan, but give Baker another weapon. Fully healthy Baker, we saw earlier in the season can have the Bucks playing at a great pace, and Nick Sadiq would be the perfect fit for this Bucks team. Put on to the Jets at 16. Yeah, I've seen some people say Ty Simpson, which I think this is way too high for him. I could see him going later down to like maybe the Browns, Rams, maybe a team trades up. But 16 seems way too high. And I'm gonna go with Jermon McCoy. The pick they traded, you know, to get from the Colts, giving away Sauce Gardner. You can get his replacement, and like McCoy, McCoy, talent wise, is like a top 5 player in the class. Like if he had played this year, we would have seen how great he is. But he just didn't play. So that might hinder his draft stock to maybe teams saying, well, because he is going to be healthy, because apparently him and Tennessee decided it was beneficial that he just not play, which is a little um weird because you would think Tennessee would want him to play, but who um but he's going to be healthy for the combine and his pro day. And if he shows out, he's going to be moving up the draft board real fast because he is the best corner talent wise. It's just we didn't see it, which is why Delane might go ahead of him. But if he goes to the combine and is amazing there, then he could rise up and be like a top 10, top 5 player. Moving on to the Lions at 17. I'm gonna go with Cassius Howell. I mean, a lot of people talking about his arm length, and you know, it is going to be a question. Him and Ruben Ben, I think, don't have around the same. I think they have around the same arm length. Apparently, no Pro Bowler, no All Pro player has had these type of arm lengths, which is a little concerning. But I feel like Howe can make it work, and a Lions team that has kind of neglected that second edge rusher, like opposite of Aiden Hutchinson. They kind of relied on, you know, undrafted free agents like James Houston or veteran guys like Marcus Davenport. They've never really invested into a long term edge, too. And I feel like with this class, they should at least try to draft one to have that long term guy next to Aiden Hutchinson for at least the next 5 seasons to really give this Lions defense a punch that they've sorely needed. Going on to 18 with the Vikings. I'm going to go Caleb Banks. I know it's an interesting pick, but like both Javon Hargrave and Jonathan Allen could be cut candidates. At least one, if not maybe both of them. Yeah, they have guys like Jalen Redmond and others, but they don't really have that elite interior guy. And Banks, I feel like, would be a phenomenal pick. Showed out at the Senior Bowl, really rose his draft stock because he didn't play much because of an injury. I think he played like the final 3 games, I want to say. But if he had played the entire year and if Florida was managed better, he could be a top 15 pick at least. And I feel like a Minnesota team that they're not going to have a new GM until after the draft. Thinks could be a guy where it's like he could be, maybe the best defensive tackle. Because have we had a defensive tackle go off the board? I don't think so. Yeah. He could be the best overall defensive tackle to come out. And Minnesota could snack him at 18. just due to the fact that he didn't play much in 2025. One of the Panthers at 19. I mean, I this could be a linebacker. C.J. Allen, Anthony Hill, but I'm gonna go Avion Terrell. But Carolina has needed a second corner opposite of J.C. Horn for a while. Yeah, they have Mike Jackson and a couple other guys, but they don't really have that secondary guy opposite of Horn. And Terrell could be that guy. A lot smaller. I think he's like 5'10", right? 5'11", 180. But he plays a lot taller than that. Obviously, the younger brother of AJ Terrell. Pretty fun if they were in the same division playing against each other. But, well, they wouldn't be playing against each other, but their teams would be. Um, but you get another corner opposite of JC Horn, and you give this defense two hopeful lockdown corners for the future to really help out a team that showed some strides at the last couple of years where they could be a contender if they make the right moves. Over to the Cowboys with their second first round pick. Obviously went Mansell to Lane earlier. TJ Parker out of Clemson. Another guy who rose his draft stock just like Caleb Banks at the Senior Bowl. And could be a phenomenal fit. Obviously they have Donovan Ezaraku, who they drafted last year, but you need multiple guys off the edge. And, Parker, who was once seen as a top 5 pick pre-draft, just didn't have that great of a season, but, under this Dallas defense, obviously being coached by, I forget his name, but he came over from the Eagles, who was apparently supposed to be Vic Fangio's successor. Dallas, that stole him away. So Parker, who is one of the very few 3-down edge rushers in this class, could be a really good fit for a Cowboys defense desperate for elite edge rushing help to, give this defense enough juice to where they can be able to help out this offense and make it to the playoffs. But on to 21 for the Steelers. Well, with Denzel Boston out of Washington. Look, they need a secondary wide receiver. I was always confused when they traded away George Pickens. Like, I get they weren't going to sign him after you trade for DK and give him that huge contract. But why not keep him and have Metcalf and Pickens at least for one season? Maybe you tag them and you have them for at least 2 seasons. So they've needed to address that wide receiver too since trading away Pickens. And Boston, who, big body guy at 6'4", 209, can really give this Pittsburgh offense another weapon besides DK and Pat Freiermuth in the passing game, and really allow whoever that quarterback is going to be for the future a dynamic playmaker who can be able to go downfield and make those, big time catches to really help this Steelers team out on offense. Around the Chargers, if he's available here, I'm going to go with him. It's Vega Uwane from Penn State. They need to address that interior offensive line. It was one of the worst. Hopefully going to get Rashawn Slater back and Joe Wolf back at the bookends. But you need to improve that interior offensive line. And if Vega Uwane is available at 22, the Chargers are going to be sprinting to the podium, putting in that pick. Went on to the Eagles at 23. An interesting pick here. Usually I've gone corner, and Colton Hood is available. I think he is still a first round corner, even though PFF has kind of dropped him down. They could go with one of the tackles to be the Lane Johnson replacement. But I'm going to go with Peter Woods, um, who, you know, I can see going as high as to the Ravens at 14. So he clearly has a variance, like many players in this class, where they could go their ceiling and floor. And look, you have Jalen Carter, who went on the field, is one of the best defensive linemen in the league. And Jordan Davis had a great season. Obviously, they still have one more year left with him on his rookie contract, but you know, making sure. But you don't know if he's going to be there long term. And, you could get his replacement in Peter Woods, who could end up being the best defensive lineman for this class. Woods has that potential. Didn't show it, just like TJ Parker didn't show it in 2025. Clemson was a disaster. Woods easily could be a guy who, if given the right system, could be the perfect player, and the Eagles could be the perfect team for him. Moving on to 24 with the Browns. Obviously went Francis Mauigoa earlier. I'm going to go with Casey Concepcion. I feel like they got to address tackle wide receiver. If not with both picks, at least with one of them. And Concepcion gives you a elite downfield player. The Browns don't have that great of a wide receiver core. Like Jerry Jeudy, a fine wide receiver too. Cedric Tillman, Isaiah Bond. They don't have any great players, and Concepcion can give this Browns offense kind of a jolt. You had add him to Harold Fannin, Quinshon Judkins. Gives you a nice young nucleus for whoever that long term quarterback is to rely on, and gives Todd Monken, some young pieces to build with for the future. But on to the Bears at 25. I'm actually going to go with Toledo safety Emmanuel McNeil Warren. I've seen a lot of people um, have him going. Um, I've seen a lot of people have him going in the first round, even higher to like Minnesota. So he could easily be a first down safety. A lot of people preseason thought there was going to be multiple safeties, but not a lot of those guys really played that great. But you have free agents with Jaquan Brisker and Kevin Byard at the safety position, and a Bears defense that wasn't that great. They kind of relied off turnovers, with interceptions, fumbles. So, Bears defense that will need some improvements. I feel like could land a, the future safety long term. Maybe next to Jaquan Brisker, maybe replacing him for the future. Moving on to the Bills. Yeah, you would think wide receiver, but none of these guys really are first round guys. Like Chris Bell tore his ACL in the final game of the season, so he's not going to be maybe available for week one. Germany Bernard is fine, but he's not really a first round type guy. He was at some point, but and then the two Indiana players at some point were also, but it's just none of these guys like Sidney Daniels, Chris Braswell, Skylar Bell from UConn, Zach Branch. But I'm actually going to scroll down and go to a Senior Bowl riser in Malachi Fields from Notre Dame, the Virginia transfer. I've seen a lot of people throw him into mocks, and the Bills need to get better at wide receiver. Khalil Shakir is a slot guy, really only, but they don't have many people outside that. Like Keon Coleman was supposed to be that, big body deep threat. Never really worked out. They signed guys like Elijah Moore, Curtis Samuel, Josh Palmer. Those really didn't work out. Malachi Fields could definitely give this Bills offense another weapon downfield because they kind of rely on in the passing attack Shakir, Knox, and Kincaid. You kind of need a wide receiver to be involved in the passing game, and Fields can be that guy. One of the Niners at 27. I'm going to go with one of the tackles. I'm going to go with Monroe Freeland, a guy who, really risen up this past season at Georgia. And look, Trent Williams isn't going to play forever. And they really need a long term plan for once he retires. But even if he's playing in 2026, that rest of the O line is not that great. Like they've kind of always been decent because of the scheme under Kyle Shanahan, but they've never really had like the greatest players on that offensive line. And Freeling could, be put in that right tackle, kind of like Panay when he was drafted. He was a left tackle, but moved over to right tackle because of Taylor Decker playing there. So Freeling could be, right tackle for now, and then he could move over to left tackle because we've seen it with Tristan Wirfs. He moved from right to left tackle and it worked out. Not everybody's Tristan Wirfs, but he could be that long-term left tackle that you have playing right tackle for now. That can really give this. I could give this um, Niners offense a boost while they're still trying to figure out the weapons outside of Christian McCaffrey and Ricky Pearsall. Going on to 28, I'm going to go with a guy who has risen up a lot, and that's Lee Hunter out of Texas Tech, staying in the state, going to the Texans. This could be a tackle. Proctor, Lomu, um, um, Max, you're a Hanacor, I think, or Chore. Forget really how to say it, but I feel like Houston, they need to get younger on that interior defensive side. And you have Hunter and Anderson on the edges, but they haven't really had that great of interior defensive line play. And Lee Hunter, who's a guy who's, risen up since the Senior Bowl. Like, not a lot of people were talking about him. And then he has a great Senior Bowl week and kind of pushes himself into the first round discussion. And so I feel like the Texans, who, yes, could go offensive line, I feel like they could also go defensive line and just continue to improve that unit. But hopefully they do improve the offensive line. Rams at 29. I'm going to go Ty Simpson. I'm not the biggest fan of the guy being a first round pick, but quarterbacks are always um, going to be overvalued. They're going to be pushed up into the first round. We saw Jackson Dart last year. Stafford is coming back for 2026, but who knows how much longer he's going to play. And Ty Simpson can be that backup that eventually becomes the starter for the Rams. And learning under Stafford, learning under McVay would be great for Simpson. And give this Rams the long term quarterback that they have needed ever since they traded for Stafford, knowing that he was going to be there for the long haul. Moving on to the Broncos. This has been Kenyon Sadiq a lot because I've always had him fall down because who knows where he ends up going. He can go as high as maybe 9 if the Chiefs want to draft him, but obviously not here. Not going to go with any of the running backs. Oh, you kind of wish there was an Omarion Hampton in this class. Um, but I'm going to go with linebacker CJ Allen out of Georgia. I've kind of needed to improve that unit. Like they have some good guys, Dre Greenlaw. I forget the other guy who had cancer and then came back. during the season, which was crazy. But they've needed to improve that unit, and CJ Allen, following a long line of great Georgia linebackers, could give this Denver defense another elite piece to be added on. Kind of like what we said with the Texans, just another great piece to add on to this defense. 31st for the Pats. They obviously lost the Super Bowl and was dominating fashion. I'm gonna go with um I'm gonna go Caleb Lobo out of Utah. You know, Jared Wilson and Will Campbell, I know both rookies, but were destroyed. Um, really that entire offensive line was getting dominated. And Caleb Lomo, the other Utah tackle, obviously alongside Spencer Fano, um, can give New England another offensive lineman to really help out this unit. If a lot of people are saying, you need to move Will Campbell into guard, which might end up happening. Lomo can be that left tackle for the long term and give this Pats offense some long term building blocks, but also really good protection for Drake May because we saw when he was under duress, he was not able to do anything, and it led to Seattle's defense being able to shut down this offense. And I think if you bring in more protection, help them out, they can be able to make it back. And the 32nd, the Super Bowl champion Seattle Seahawks, I'm gonna have them go with Hood out of Tennessee. Have a lot of free agents, Tariq Woolen, Josh Jobe on that side of the ball. And if you're gonna lose, multiple of those guys, you're gonna need a replacement at Hood, who I think is still a first round corner. Um, despite him not really doing much at the Senior Bowl, um, can really give Seattle another chess piece on that defense to really improve. But yeah, that is my post Super Bowl mock draft. Hope you guys have a great day. Hope you guys like, comment, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. And I'll catch you guys in the next video. But until then, hope you have a great day and bye.